Hey guys, so I know this isn't normally where the sponsor segment goes in the workflow of video, but honestly, I messed up in the editing process on this one. My bad. But I didn't want to skip this because I really wanted to take a moment to talk to you about my partner for this week, Async.com. For a podcaster and video editor, this is the all-in-one AI video editor you've been looking for. I've been using their platform since day one, and it has been amazing to watch their progress go from just another podcast hosting platform into a complete powerhouse for creators, especially for people like me who, as you know, and can clearly tell, I can't edit for shit. Async leverages AI to give you total control over your video. You can record, edit, generate clips, add subtitles, even dub your content in over 15 languages. Plus, it allows you to upscale your footage easily and repurpose your content for different platforms between different tools. It's truly a game changer. So, if you want to streamline your workflow and make your editing process painless, check out async.com. The link will be in the description down below. All right, back to the video. People do not want to.
There is no easy button. They're just looking for the easy, as opposed to AI kind of gives you that scapegoat. So why doesn't Claude just do this for you after all? I think too many companies don't have a real mission. Like everyone's job, that's nonsensical. Like, I'm sorry, the numbers don't bear out. I have a 5-year-old daughter, so that's a tough question.
Like it's
I'll give you a prime example of something I saw that was just, well, I can give you 2 or 3, but I know we're recording. I don't know how you want to. Okay, that's fine. One of the things I find shocking, there's a few, I found it really shocking that most Americans think that Canada has it together when it comes to healthcare. And maybe comparatively you do to certain degrees. However, there is a lot of like nepotism in order to know a doctor in order to get in sooner. And the real problem that I was seeing was like, you're paying an exorbitant amount of taxes and there's an assumption that is going to cover you. Yet my mother-in-law had like a heart palpitation. The doctor wanted her to have a heart halter in order to check for 24 or 48 hours, I think it was, the rhythm of her heart. So, of course, you wouldn't think, hey, we should put that off. However, when she went out to the waiting room in order to get this, or reception in order to get this device, she was told she could be put on a 3-month waiting list for it or pay $200 extra and get it immediately. Now, that's not to say $200 is throwaway for anyone. It isn't necessarily, but the idea that you would just kind of say, okay, well, if you're willing to pay, you get a better version of healthcare. And if you're not willing to pay, well, then you get this hope and pray that the issue isn't really there and won't have an effect on you over the next 3 months. Isn't really a way of saying we've got healthcare down. Right?
It's bad too. So my partner is a nurse in the ICU here. It's not that we don't fund our healthcare enough. It's our funding for healthcare goes to the behind the scenes bureaucracy and not the people actually doing the healthcare services. And like I'm waiting to find a doctor or a nurse to interview because I know so much about the internal side of things. And I'm just like, I want to shout this to the world, but I can't. She can lose her job by me doing
Understood.
that.
And also, but you have like a kind of behind the scenes look at it, and I completely understand that.
But Canadians are very against a two-tier health system either. And I'm like, Australia has it and it's working great for them. What's the problem? And it's all based on, oh, well, the rich people get better services. And it's like, well, it's better to have the rich people getting better services so that the poor people can have actual services.
Right. No, I get it. It's a problem that I don't think anyone has really tackled super well.
Yeah.
I think everyone looks across over the fence at others and says, oh, you guys have it so much better. It's the grass is greener kind of theory, right? But the reality is,
it's all wasted money. It's all it is.
Yeah, and we're really, unfortunately, a lot of healthcare as it exists today, and again, I'm no healthcare expert. I just happen to be a person who's dealt with it a lot. I've just found that a lot of healthcare today is completely and utterly reactive.
Yeah.
And that reactivity, it costs us. It costs us in the long run. It's just, unfortunately, the things that are harder to qualify the ROI, the cost of, in this case, the cost of inaction, because you can't necessarily quantify that as well. people stick to the more formulaic.
Yep.
Okay, well, if we give them a pill to keep them alive rather than curing the issue, right? Because there is a monetary benefit to doing that, and capitalism definitely pushes in that direction, and pharmaceuticals fit nicely into that bucket, and so on and so forth.
I'm so excited for the AI breakthroughs that we're going to have in the next 10 years. Like, I'm already seeing.
So if we want to go down the AI route, we absolutely can. But I would just say if AI is allowed to do those things, and there is a lot of, I think there are a lot of things we could identify. I think the identification and correlation of potential things, not necessarily causation, but correlation, that don't exist today that are expected of a healthcare practitioner, I think is wild.
Yeah.
Like, we expect essentially a doctor to have all of this compendium of almost like and forgive me for the old kind of reference, but encyclopedic knowledge, which should also update according to the latest stuff, which means they have to keep up with everything going on in a space, and then bring that back and know how to connect the dots in a quote unquote social reference, Dr. House-esque process without the bedside manner of Dr. House, right? So all of that is like, okay, it's nice in theory. In practice, I don't know how realistic that is, right? And that's where augmented, let's call it augmented medicine would make sense, right? I'm going to propose to you ideas that, and you need a lot of data too. You need a lot of private data that where you can say, oh, these 5, 10, 15 points, 20 points, 100 points. Causation isn't clear, but correlation possibly is, because we can notice that someone, what do they say, 50% of autoimmune diseases are undefined? Okay. That's probably because no one's sitting there trying to connect the dots, because there's no cash behind that.
Yep.
Right? Like, and that's the issue. But it doesn't mean those 50% of people that are struggling with autoimmune diseases don't deserve some form of medication, hope, understanding, and ultimately like a nomenclature for what they have, so they can say, hey, this can be studied.
It's just a side note on that. That's Canada's government's now going to killing those people as opposed to actually helping them. So that's the fun part we're dealing with here.
Listen, we don't have our act that much better together anyway. I tried to convince my wife not to take my last name, unfortunately.
Nobody lies to their search bar. Think about that. Every single day, millions of people type their real fears, real desires, real questions into a box. No filter, no performance, just raw honesty. And right now, AI is intercepting those answers. And right now, AI is intercepting those answers before your brand ever gets a chance to show up. Today's guest built one of the biggest search intelligence companies on the planet, scaled it to $500 million, sold it to WeWork. Yes, that WeWork. Watched WeWork nearly destroy everything, and then led a fight to buy it back. Now he's sounding the alarm again. The way people find you is fundamentally changing, and most businesses are completely invisible in the places they matter most. Stephan Bajaio has spent 20 years inside the machine of how humans search, decide, and buy. He's the co-founder of Conductor, the enterprise SEO platform behind brands like FedEx, Uber, and Johns Hopkins, and rode it from a scrappy startup to a $525 million valuation. He survived selling WeWork, survived the implosion, and helped buy the company back in what might be the greatest "we told you so" moments in SaaS history. He's been the CMO, chief evangelist, keynote speaker at the biggest stages in marketing, and now he's CEO of VibeLogic, a company built on one radical premise: Google is no longer the front door to your business. Stephan, let's get into this.
Thanks for having me, Cody.
Now, I have to ask every guest this one question before we start. What is a truth in your industry that people do not want to admit?
There is no easy button.
Very fair.
And more so now than ever, unfortunately. I hate to say it, but executives especially, and coming from that world, Tell you they're just looking for the easy as
Mhm.
opposed to there must be a quick way to do it, and AI kind of gives you that scapegoat. So it's rough for a lot of teams. It's rough for a lot of people who are trying to actually produce good stuff, but they get told, well, why aren't you just putting it into ChatGPT? Why doesn't Claude just do this for you after all? So yeah, definitely I would say that's the number one thing.
Was was it really easier with SEO than it is nowadays?
SEO has always been difficult, but by nature, SEO is a verb and it's meant to be an optimization. I think the SE part of the SEO is the false narrative, right? What basically happened in most organizations is the SEO is probably one of the most oftentimes knowledgeable individuals about business and the technical side of how the business tries to express itself online. They're a combination of a dev and a content marketer and a I'd say like product person, right? And what they're trying to essentially do, they're liable for all, but capable for none. And I know that sounds really weird, but when you think about it, you could literally be an SEO with the answers to the algorithm, like 100% answers to the algorithm. And the odds that you will be successful is still not guaranteed. In fact, depending on the size of the company and depending on how much control you ultimately have, the larger the org, the less likely you are to actually succeed simply based on structure. So there's a content team over here. If they don't write the stuff that you're trying to make rank, well, you don't have something to rank. Or the dev team does a million things for the product or for the website in other ways, or take it in good luck, right? Take a ticket and wait. So hurry up and wait. And at that point, if they don't make the changes and the changes aren't actually for even simple things, you can't even go in and make those changes yourself. You're at their mercy. So that concept of SEO being kind of beholden to everyone else forces the SEO to understand what's going on in the business much more frequently than other roles do. They usually stay in their little silos in their pockets and say, don't bother me, I got this. Let me just hit my KPIs. But with SEO, you have to go searching and figuring out, no pun intended, in the business. And by virtue of that, we've kind of grown up in an industry that forces you to think a little bit differently, think beyond search engines, sure. But really, what are people searching? What do they care about? What's the demand? How do we show up? That was the antiquated version. My new version we can get into in a little bit called Web Presence Intelligence, but because we need another acronym. But this whole like AEO, GEO, AIO, what you're going to happen to notice about all of them, folks, is the O. It's an optimization, which is something that's more, I would say, akin and definitive to the type of personality of the individual you want. They want to be frustrated when they're online at a fast food place, thinking to themselves, why don't they have someone with a iPad able to fill this in? Or when they go to a doctor's office and they're given a piece of paper to go fill out that they know someone in reception or in billing is going to have to then re-enter those things in. They're naturally frustrated by that concept because it's an unoptimized system. It's a waste. They see that, they feel that, they can't help it. It's just the way they are. It doesn't make them curmudgeons, but so
No,
long answer, Cody.
completely understand coming from the government sector where the motto was, we've always done it that way, and that
Of
infuriated me.
course. Why change, right?
It's because the money. That's why they don't change.
Yeah.
So I just want to get into before we get into your web presence optimization, I do want to ask you a little bit about the WeWork story because
Sure.
I'm just finding out about this. Like, can you explain how that happened? I understand that WeWork was supposed to be this beautiful concept of a company that you could just rent office spaces anywhere, anytime. And honestly, I thought it was a good idea at the start. And then for it to collapse, what happened?
So WeWork is interesting in that I have to say my experience with WeWork was actually quite positive. Not everyone had that experience. I felt a kinship to their mission from day one because Adam is the kind of individual that once you meet with him, I don't know how to put this. It's and this is not a knock on the rest of the humans I've ever met in my life, but he's so unique and so different that you vibrate a bit afterwards. I literally, and it was something I could compare notes with the original co-founder of Conductor, Seth, and other people. Like, you feel different. You feel it's hard to explain because, again, it's not something that's very common. So you can't really associate it with, oh yeah, when you meet with, I've never really felt that much something like that in my life, but Adam really, you can see the depth of his belief in the mission of what he's trying to accomplish. And ultimately, he was trying to accomplish, as was Miguel, his co-founder, trying to change the world for the better. Now, we can argue the way that was done. We can argue whether or not there was greed or anything else involved in that. Personally, I don't know. I had a great respect for Adam, and I really loved the time I got to spend with him, the kinds of things we were trying to accomplish. But I will say the problem with what we were talking about there was that the model was a little too real estate meant to be technology. And yes, let me tell you, the technology was awesome. Like, they had some really cool stuff. I could give you one example. They were able to correlate utilization of a conference room based on its name.
Okay.
I was like, what do you mean? Well, because they had sensors everywhere, they could tell what rooms were being used, what rooms weren't being used. They could tell you whether or not that video game that you put in the break room is actually getting used or not, because there was a sensor on the seat as to whether or not people were sitting there. Like, there was all sorts of ways to do that kind of stuff that I thought was really ingenious. But one of the interesting things I remember is them telling me that someone had called the room the reading room, and there was no utilization. When it was changed the name to the library, 500% increase utilization. Why? Individuals would rather be seen in a room that says library because it's studying than reading, which would be seen as a passive activity that, while you would be reading the same thing, you're doing the same thing, the room hasn't changed, nothing is different, just the name, right? Which goes back a little bit to search, right? How do people express their needs? Is it in the terms of the consumer, and especially when they don't know people are watching, right? So it's what are the terms you type into the search bar at 2:30 a.m. and the way you express your problem, not you specifically, but you as an audience. And then what do you find? And I think when you go back to WeWork, though, just to give you a little more direct answer, the problem was, and I think we could have solved it, but I think we were too scattered at the time as an organization. They were building and doing everything.
Yeah.
I mean, everything.
You couldn't go anywhere without seeing an article about them.
I mean, and it wasn't just that, but it was also the business they had a school, they had We Live, they had WeWork, they had We Learned. That it was just everything there were so many businesses. And also, I have yet to understand, I guess it's feasible, but if you actually look at the rate of growth in that company, like literally growth, I think when they first became our client, which they did before they essentially bought us, they were something like, they might have been 3,000 employees.
Wow.
By the time we were in there, they were 6. By the time we were out, they were 13,000. So, and we're talking about the span of 2 years, essentially here. Okay. So 4Xing your company with people, and not just anyone. I mean, they were hiring some of the, at least title wise, some of the greatest people you could get. And I remember there was never a time I would go to WeWork's office and not find myself with at least 1 to 2 new executives in the room, all of whom came from a PayPal, an eBay, a this, a that, and this was their first meeting, like with each other and me. And so it was a little bit of like, okay, who has the tribal knowledge around here in order to like replicate what we're trying to accomplish? What exactly are we trying to accomplish? And not just that, a lot of the things we were trying to do, no one really had a sense. So you'd have the new person or the new people, plus us being new, coming in with ideas and trying to figure out like what should be built, how it should be built, what could be done. So there was a lot of just like really smart people trying to do stuff, but at a rate and pace that wasn't always tenable, to be honest.
Very fair. Like, there's no reason you should have to scale that fast, honestly. Like,
Well, I mean, you know what? If you're given a $47 billion potential valuation, you're going to scale as fast as they let you, right? Like, and more quickly than humanly possible. And in all fairness, it was a rocket ship, and it was amazing. And I got to tether myself to it for 2 years to some degree. And that was interesting to be able to see that from the inside too. I mean, you'd seen it from the outside of other companies, but living it is a different story. It was a pleasure and a pain, but it was one that I wouldn't trade really for anything. So I'm glad I went through that in my career.
yeah.
And I think it gives me insights hopefully I'll be able to use throughout the rest of it.
And I'm assuming Conductor's like thriving because of a lot of those insights that you've built off of.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, I don't want to take the credit that I don't deserve. Conductor was originally founded by Seth Bismarck. He's the guy, and he's the guy who made all of that possible. I happen to be a co-founder, one of the original co-founders that kind of built Conductor from the time we went from link experts, a link building company, into, hey, we should really build a software for this. And then we kind of all became token co-founders at that time. I think the real difference between me and the, let's say, 20 some odd individuals who were given that title is I tried to earn it every day. And that's not a knock on them. I actually would use it as a force function to get into the rooms with Fortune 500 CMOs, CEOs, people I probably did not have the right to be in the rooms with, and speak truth to power and tell them what they were doing wrong. Because I saw the potential of this space and of their business languishing, and 99%, no, let's be fair, 90% of the time it was their own doing. They just didn't realize it. But no one would tell them that, right? So I was more than willing to be the guy to come in and have the honest conversations and say, hey, maybe we need to think about why it takes 3 months to get something live on the site, or why we can have all of these potential business ideas, but we can't get them live because, and then fill in the blank. So, depending on the business, and trust me, I've worked with every single type of business, it seems, they all have their dysfunctions. And the more you could kind of help them understand that you'd seen this before and that they weren't alone in it, but that it still was an issue, I think was a huge win for helping companies, which is ultimately what I try to do.
Do you think too many companies are working with employees that don't actually understand the mission?
I think too many companies don't have a real mission. Like, let's start there first. I think companies need to be real. And listen, not everyone's a mission-based company, and let's be fair about that. And if they are, they make it so broad and so esoteric that nobody can tie themselves to it. And the bigger the company, the bigger the struggle. So I'll give you like a real hard and fast example, right? Conductor was very much about humanizing marketing. That was our goal. That was our, I would say that was kind of our North Star in the way that we were trying to help people. We said, all of these companies have a tremendous amount of wisdom at their disposal, but they're not necessarily being found when they should, and they're not helping people, right? So I used to wear a t-shirt, I still do to this day, that says, if you're not helping people, you're just selling stuff. And it's a mantra I really believe. Did Conductor as a whole die? Probably not. Did most? Sure. And that's easier to do in a, 100-person to 400-person company where you can espouse to those things, have town halls in person, oftentimes really get to a very honest place as a business, as opposed to like a GE Healthcare or like a Siemens or someone where like, I am this speck in the ocean of your company. You won't know that I was there even if I disappear, right? And so I think it's really hard for people to understand how they impact the business. And I think businesses, even smaller ones, like I remember specifically having a conversation with Seth and saying, like, we would do something called the $1 Million March. We wanted to get to $1 million of recurring revenue at one point in the business. And that was a really big milestone for the business. But what did it mean to the account manager? What did it mean to the developer? What did it mean? Like, they all in this business were shareholders, so they all had shares to some degree, but what did it really mean to them? Yeah. So the idea was, well, instead of saying, oh, we're going to throw a big party, we'll have Snoop Dogg or something crazy, right? Instead saying, okay, we're hearing from the business we really need to focus on the UX UI. And right now, it's not in the budget to hire someone. But if we hit this model right here, if we're able to achieve this, that person's going to exist in our company. Now that's something that goes like, oh, cool, that solves a problem I know we're having, right? I can now say that when I see Cody in the office or I see him on a call, I remember back to what we had to do to get to that milestone in order to bring him on board, right? It becomes tangible. It becomes something
Sense
you're
of
like,
ownership.
right? Yeah, you do get a sense of ownership, and not in just some monetary like thing that, in all fairness, someone along the way will probably offer you more money. That's not what keeps you at a company. I mean, I'd love to tell you it is, but it's not.
Wait for that.
A lot of folks don't realize that in order to build loyalty, in order to build cachet, in order to build a desire to want Monday rather than fear Monday, it's building a culture. I like to say you have to pay into that culture when things are good, because you're going to need it when things are bad.
Yeah.
Pull the deposits, right? It's like we just did a round of layoffs that we didn't want to do. And what do you do about it now? Like, who's going to stick around? Who's going to tough it out now? Or are they all just going to say, screw it? You just let go someone I love, so I'm out of here, right?
I'm hearing a lot of that nowadays.
There's a ton of that nowadays. And it's even the reasons being given are, forgive my French, bullshit.
But don't worry,
the fact that AI is now coming in and supposedly stealing everyone's job, that's nonsensical. Like, I'm sorry, the numbers don't bear out.
Yeah.
The models don't bear out. And while, yes, there's definitely some places AI can step into an organization and, enhance processes and so forth, it doesn't realize that Cody and I didn't follow the SOP because the SOP is broken, because we were never given an SOP in order to figure out how to do this. And so the thing that's critical to the business that Cody and I do, or the thing that the business doesn't even realize is critical, but if it wasn't working, they'd realize real quick. But now Cody disappears and I'm moved to a different thing. That thing doesn't happen anymore. And AI was supposed to understand that just by looking at job descriptions and understanding of what people are doing. And the fact is, it's not going to work that way. It just isn't. There's too much sinew built in personal relationships, in ways around problems. I know this. The most successful people in an organization, especially larger ones, are the ones that know how to get things done in spite of the red tape.
Yeah.
So if what you're doing is building a system based on red tape, a robot will just lemmings itself into the wall or right off the cliff because it doesn't know any better, right? And it doesn't even know how to handle those situations.
Don't give it, or don't for the audience, don't discredit that yet. We more than likely will get there in the future. The way AI is developing, I don't even know. Like, sometimes it's smarter than me, and then sometimes it's completely dumber than me. It's all a matter of, I think it's just missing parts of data. Especially, I echo Mo Godot's sentiment on this. We have no love, no human data on the internet. It's all driven by algorithms and hate and things like that. It's still missing a big corpus of human knowledge that we still have to give it. Robots will help that, but until we get robots actually learning what hate is and actually getting pushed into roads and all the fun stuff we're about to have in the next 10 to 15 years that I'm scared and everybody's scared of. And it doesn't,
listen, I don't want to say it's not coming to some degree. What I do want to just be clear about is
now is not the time.
It's not the time. These are not the droids you're looking for, as they say. And I think that we're at a place right now with the utilization of AI and the capability of AI that we have to remember a majority of people that are using AI in the grand scheme of population. So I won't speak for Canada. I'll speak for the US. We are talking about a fraction of individuals. Okay. And the ones that do have used it as an alternative search engine or a way to make a funny image for their kid. Right. So this is so far from where we're going to be. I think Apple will be the one to introduce AI more commonly via Siri as an assistant now that they've made the deal with Gemini. I think
surprised me. Sorry.
Well, I didn't surprise me, and we can get into all that, but I'll get into that whole story if you want, depending on where we want to go today. But I will say this to you. There is a distinct bubble of essentially you have to remember what happened with Google. So let me give this in the same context. People didn't use search engines. Then they started using search engines because they started trusting the web. Remember, we're at the deep version of AI. Okay. If you don't know what that reference was, and I'm just a weird beepy guy, that's a reference to a dial-up modem. Yes, we used to use a telephone to slowly connect to the internet. We were sent a CD by AOL in order to get online. It was a very different kind of world. Okay. So that's the version that people are building for right now. They're building a chatbot of AI. That is a very like rudimentary, not great user experience version of using AI, right? True AI is predictive, can do stuff that you can't even intend, and then all of a sudden is there when you need it. It'll happen. But again, people didn't know the web. They wouldn't even put their credit cards online, right? We didn't even have the problem of credit card fraud at that point the way we do. We now spend trillions of dollars because of credit card fraud, but online credit card fraud. But for that matter, like none of that existed. So all the problems we don't even know are coming, like credit card fraud, online version of that for AI doesn't exist yet. It's coming. However, bringing us back to Google. So you're new to the web and you start using a search engine. The first thing you thought was, forgive my French again, holy shit, this thing is like God. It gives me the answer to everything. And it's until it wasn't. And then you realized that, why is this ranking first? Like, what? Hold on. Oh, that was a paid ad. Hold on. That was a confusing thing. Let me go back. Why is this stuff irrelevant? This doesn't make sense. Well, hold on a second. How do I know the doctor that when I put in best oncologist actually cures cancer? That doesn't make. All right. You have basically the users go, I love it. I love it. I love it. Holy crap. What the hell is this? What the hell is this? Oh, okay. Yeah, this is probably the best thing we have in order to. You're going to see the same exact pattern with AI right now and LLMs. Okay. Most people haven't tried doing things with LLMs to the tune of some research, some stuff where, you know what? It did make up the third or the fourth response. And it's not going to do it from a, this is one of the biggest pitfalls of AI and its development is it doesn't have a confidence score to tell you this is most likely ranks number one versus this is less likely page 2 of Google, right? We don't have that version in AI. So it will literally tell you a lie on the second of a list of 10, but it won't call out that that's not accurate. You can click that link. It doesn't go anywhere. And you're like, what is that? When they talk about hallucinations, it literally can make things up because it's meant to be a prediction model in terms of what's the next word, the next letter, the next thing that mathematically makes sense. And sometimes that doesn't match reality. In fact, quite a lot of times it doesn't match reality. It's very good in certain ways, but it's also very bad in other ways. And that disappointment and that trust drop of, oh, this isn't God, hasn't happened to society yet. It will, and you'll see a backlash, and then you'll see a coming of age of, wow, these things really do make us better. Oh my God, this assistant, like, Siri really can help me have a better life because no, I shouldn't have to book my doctor and remember and do all that stuff. Like this thing can actually predict and tell me and go directly to the doctor's office and say, oh, I need the dentist, I need the eye doctor, I need this, that, and the other. And it can figure out whether your insurance for Americans is taken by this practitioner or not. Like all of these things that we spend so much of our time on, and honestly, they create a tremendous amount of decision fatigue. That's, I think, where we're heading. And that's where I am very interested to see what we ultimately get.
I see it now. I've even set up my LLMs, like not my LLMs, my agents to tell me when it's like, I give confidence scores to everything now because I'm like, I don't trust anything. And I have walls of text that I am not going to read through because I'm a trial and error dude. You give it to me, I'm going to copy and paste it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, I'm going to go back and reiterate.
Don't trust your confidence scores. That's all I'm going to say to you because now I did this a long time ago, and a long time ago in this space could be 6 months, right? But I remember specifically feeding, this was back in the ChatGPT days where I was feeding ChatGPT, custom GPT, a lot of my content to see if it could mirror my thought patterns, speech patterns, whatever, in terms of content creation and stuff. So I was very interested in having a partner in it to ask questions to and see what it would do. And So I fed it a whole bunch of stuff. And every time I would ask it right afterwards, what are the odds you think this will map back to me? And since it doesn't really have anything to pin itself to, it'd be like, first it said 80%, then I added a few more blog posts, then it said 85, then I added a few LinkedIn posts. Now it said 90. I was like, okay, I'm going to push the envelope and try and get to 95. I'll feel real good at 95 because I know it won't get to 100. And when I did that, it literally responded, I can't provide you a confidence score. And I said, well, hold on a second. Have you looked through the chat log and noticed that you've been giving me a confidence score this whole time? And it said, yeah, but that was a metaphor. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. That doesn't even make sense. Like you're right. So again,
No,
models get better. You should never assume. You should always go back and check because new models are constantly coming out. What I'm talking about is 6 months old or a year old, and a year in this thing is like a spring chicken compared to this old guy. So,
yeah, using Obsidian, my memory backup, just so that it's an external source that it saves to.
Everyone is so many people are telling me how much they love Obsidian. I haven't gotten on that train yet, but like I feel like I'm going to be forced onto it because there's just so many people I admire that are using it, and I feel like I'm very late to the game on it because it's been around for a really long time. But it's like finally this thing that like you can mind map, and it's kind of a dream I've had for a long time, but I just don't know that I'm proficient enough yet to get in there and invest my time, because it's not money, it's just time.
I got lucky. There was a user who just pushed it. Used AI, so he actually sent me a few. He built his own repository to actually take the. So when I'm using an agent, it goes out. It has it sends a giant chunk of here's all of my credentials. Here's what I need to do in a file. He's built a repository that instead of having that, it condenses it all. So you don't use like I've gone. I saved like 300% in my token usage because of this.
Oh, wow.
So his name is XPal Team on X. He's got a really good understanding of it, and it's MIT vetted. So it's
awesome.
great technology.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I do want to get into your VibeLogic because that's what we brought on here. So can you tell me a little bit about the company?
Sure. So VibeLogic is really birthed out of the idea that organizations large and small really don't have a sense of where they need to go right now. And we're at this moment in time in marketing where a lot of companies are getting, it's an old story and one I've witnessed honestly for the last 25 years in digital and more so in Conductor for 14 years. We're having a lot of shiny object syndrome with LLMs. Everybody wants to go rank in an LLM. Oh, it's the next thing. Oh, I'm going to be the first one, right? I want to be first actor. I want to be the one who ranks here. And again, ranks. There's no rankings. It doesn't exist. The way people position rankings is not the same thing as the ranks we know in Google. And I'm kind of throwing all that out. And I'm saying, you know what? It's not about rankings and SEO anymore. This is what web presence intelligence is, right? It's this concept of what is, when you look at a topic not being one keyword, but let's say a cluster of keywords, a cluster of prompts, a set of things that kind of go together, that creates the demand, right? That is our demand signal. Understand our demand signal. What's returned, whether that's in an LLM, whether it's in Google search, wherever, what's being returned. And then once those things are returned, most of the time marketing is frustrated they aren't the answer. I say, whoa, slow down. That's not how it's supposed to be. If you want to be the answer and also gain the credibility, this isn't about being the quote unquote answer every time. It's being where the answers are provided. So if a Reddit thread shows up, is anyone in social doing anything about that? Do you know that this Reddit thread is constantly being mentioned both in search and LLMs? And so a lot of people are going to cross paths with this thing and it's going to be important. So are we buying advertising on it? Are we getting a subject matter expert to actually comment there? When a publisher shows up, do we know who authored that piece? Does PR know this person? It's not the most notable journalist. It's the person who's most relevant to that topic who probably will get tapped by someone else to create that next piece of content. So Are you aware of them? Are they aware of you? Have you thought about buying your way onto that page with display and buying up all the retargeting? So it's really about thinking about partnerships. We find that way, opportunities. We find authorships. We find, like I said, display. It's the idea of multi-channel marketing that's existed in this little siloed compartment thing was a detriment to what we're trying to accomplish now, which is we really want to be where the questions are being asked and answered. And in order to do that, first we have to understand what's influencing. If you have a bad review out there and it's showing up on a review site, or maybe a comparative site or comparative review page between you and a competitor, and that is constantly coming up when someone looks this stuff up, there is no KPI to figure out the harm that's going to cause you. Yeah. But I can tell you with a very high certainty, doing nothing about it, ignorance isn't bliss, it's your competitor's market share. So in order to actually act on that, and getting back to what VibeLogic does, one, we help organizations understand, first and foremost, what does demand look like and what does supply look like? And supply to us is an opportunity to buy, build, or borrow, right? And so how will you as a business look at this and consider it? And you could do that with stuff you want to show up from a marketing perspective. You could do that for new products you're even thinking about getting into the market on, where now you can understand what influences people. And before you even put a pixel to the web or even produce the product, you could have a better sense of, forget the market conditions. I'm talking about what actually moves the needle, what people see, where they actually get influenced. What are the videos that show up? What do those videos do? What do they say? What's the sentiment like? All of that stuff is available. It's just never really looked at because that's not anyone's job in the company. And so that's the problem, is everyone's supposed to just like hammer and nail.
Right? It honestly sounds like it honestly sounds like it's just a web user, like a specific web user. Like when I was growing up, I had one tag name, right? And I went out and I went everywhere to find this information, discuss this information. It's essentially having a Redditor at your beck and call. Redditor, not anymore. Like since the Exodus, it's not the site it used to be. But I'm talking like old school troll level person who went out there and searched deeply for this information to be able to like bring it up to other people, showcase how good it is, and just give ideas on things mostly.
Yeah, I mean, the concept is really it's not super difficult. It's just, it needs to be done in a particular way in order to show, because you're not just giving everything and saying, go. You have to be very specific in what you're looking for and trying to put together on a demand side, and then really identifying cleanly on the supply side and mapping that back to what a company is trying to accomplish. And when you figure those two things out well, it turns into an opportunity for them to really get cited in the LLMs, rank better in Google or any search engine for that matter, grow their bottom line because people are seeing it more, increase brand notoriety. Like all of that stuff comes along with it. And it's the right thing to do as a business. You think it was obvious, but it's not, because the way we've marketed is so siloed that we only look at each one of these things as a KPI against an audience, at least in marketing, but the audience isn't trapped in the channel. And that's been the fallacy that we have had, is like, oh, the customer journey starts at our website. No, it doesn't. The website is actually oftentimes the end of the journey, right? So what is influencing them before they get to you? How are we not doing this before LLM kind of forced it on us, right? The reality is, I've been talking about this concept since 2012. We just didn't deploy it into Conductor's software because there were so many other things to deal with at the time. But the reality is that this is not new or novel. Well, maybe it's novel because not a lot of people do it. But it's been there for the taking. And the companies that have done that are the ones that I have seen be very different, and they're approaching it differently. They're looking at their consumer differently. Some are even starting, and we haven't gotten there yet, to think of their marketing departments differently. Because I believe we're getting to a place where you're going to think of marketing by audience throughout a life cycle. And the life cycle, I've always said this too, it's not a funnel, it's an hourglass, and everything flows to the bottom. Unless you're in the business of selling something one time to one person and then not caring what that experience is like on the post-sale side, or whether or not they refer you verbally to anyone else because their experience was crap, you really do need to think about what happens post-purchase. And you do need to think about the problems they run into and the concerns they have and the things they want, right? And the feature enhancements, and take that information and bring it back to the top of the funnel, quote unquote, AKA the hourglass, and come back down, which really means you should be following someone through the life cycle of their experience, not trying to hand that off between marketers because they happen to do it in paid or organic or PR or partnerships or, right? That's a very old way of looking at the web. Whereas now we need to start evolving ourselves to the new web and the new experience, because it's going to continue to change.
It's bringing the human back in the loop.
Yeah, well, the human has to be in the loop because the human is ultimately what you're trying to impact, right? We could say we're trying to impact agents, but the reality is we're still trying to impact humans. And empathy is key, right? I think people with AI content are losing the thread, frankly. Google is discounting that content very quickly. We're seeing Gemini and others starting to watermark in ways we can't even see visual content. Okay. They've recognized the dangers of AI to some degree, and they are starting to flag stuff, right? Yeah. So there will be guaranteed ways to identify AI generated content and stuff. And the reality is, if you're not willing to put the time, again, not press the easy button, but rather actually put the time and effort into and thought process into creating something that's meaningful, helping people rather than just selling stuff, that is what will get, recommended and constantly brought up, because it will build a viable brand. It will build a loyalty brand. It'll build the credibility that you don't have to be the one going and talking about your company on Reddit, because 15 other people have already done that for you, right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing we will get to, but it doesn't happen overnight. And again, the larger the company, the more glacial. So that's why I've chosen to work with companies that are anything from literally small businesses who don't even know how to name their service pages or don't even have service pages, which drives me nuts, to Fortune 500 internet retailer 1000s that just need, honestly, like a cool uncle like me to roll into town and say, hey, it's time to eat your vegetables and do your homework. And even if mom has been saying that for the last 2 months, somehow it sounds a lot cooler when they pay me to say it. So
it's helpful out here because I'm in the middle of nowhere and everybody's still using Facebook as their main source of getting everybody. So I'm got a whole market to myself out here.
That's kind of amazing. And I'm not going to lie. That's very enticing. I wish I could just, bring fire and everyone would be like, oh, I'm a wheel,
So I'm working right now as a tourism coordinator for my town, and I'm just building the relationships with people, showcasing what I can do, how I can help them. And I'm like, guys, I want you guys to modernize so that you can do more things that you want to do as opposed to what you have to do. My auto shop doesn't even have like a booking system. They do everything by hand. And I'm like, guys, I could build a system in an hour for you that does all of this, but they don't trust me yet to be building that trust slowly. And I'm realizing that the human connection is going to drive a lot of people in the new age. And I'm just trying to explain to people, like, your input is now more important than your output. Whatever you put into the people, the relationships, what you're trying to do is way more important than whatever comes out of the system.
You're so right. You're so right. And I'm going to take that for 1 second and package it up for folks. Let's say we all have an easy button. Let's say it's Claude, it's ChatGPT, it's whatever it is, right? And we can all argue as to my prompt is better than your prompt, right? But the reality is, if we're all working off the same data set, the odds that the variability of our results will be different is very low, right? Meaning whatever you're building, the other guy has the ability to build just as easily. So your easy button isn't any better than someone else's easy button. We could argue, oh, I spend $200 a month for this, or I spend X amount of tokens, therefore I'm so insulated. No, the reality is, if we all have the same tools and the same construction material, there's only a limited amount that we could do that's going to vary from one another, right? In a great way. Now, the difference is Those tools, that doesn't make the tool wrong, right? It doesn't make the tool is not the culprit, right? It's literally the material. So if you think about the material at this point, now it's about something really interesting, which is every company has its own wisdom. Now, whether or not they've actually mapped that wisdom out, or whether or not it lives in the gut of the auto shop dealer who knows that when a person comes in who's doing this or that, or feels like this or that, knows that's someone who's going to actually come back to me 15 times and is actually really great. And this person is just getting a tire change and we're never really going to see them again. Right. So, and I only have so much time to deal with anyone. Right. So there, that knowledge, whether it's been institutionalized, and I don't mean that as in, a, oh
Straight
my God,
jacket.
a straitjacket, right? That wisdom, if you can qualify and quantify that wisdom in a meaningful way, you now have a unique data set, which means no one else can necessarily replicate what you have. And that's where unfortunately the output of AI can often look the same as something that was made with an easy button, very little prompt put in, which is to me one of the most frustrating things, because I can spend a lot of time taking people's data points and really refining them and getting them good. Outcome, someone will just say, well, you built that with AI. Yeah, I did. Doesn't mean AI came up with all those points. Doesn't mean that's how it's built. Doesn't mean that's how it's that's what created the data. It's just encapsulate what holds the data, right? So data is everywhere. It's everywhere in your business. I guarantee you, it's even the red tape in your emails. If you go back and looked every time that a lawyer said you can't publish that in SEO and gave a reason, and you don't have a repository of that, well, then take every single email from the lawyer, dump it in and say, well, what commonalities do you see here? And how can we build a set of rules out of that? And all of a sudden, we have our own way to double check content before it goes live, simply based on a lawyer who spent hours of time and billed us for that time. And we're just using that historically, right, as this compendium to double check against. There's so much of that in your business, I guarantee you. If you don't know, like, talk to Cody, talk to myself. I guarantee you we can find it. The data points are there. And that's what makes you unique. That's what makes your business unique. They're in your gut sometimes, and that requires a lot more pulling to get it out. But that gut, if you've ever read Blink or anything else like those books that talk the 10,000 hours it took to become an expert in something, that has taught you some stuff that if you can just get it down, the easy button on top of that makes that content really cool and really valuable and something you could literally sell as an asset, because your knowledge is not something someone can just find on the web, right? So that's where I'd say to people, like, think differently, start thinking that there's a lot more behind this. I know it's scary, but it's actually an opportunity. That's where I think the gold rush is happening, is think about like what your business is so good at and what you're specialized in and what's unique to your business in terms of your knowledge. And I'm not saying go share it openly with everyone, but I am saying design a model that allows you to use that information, because whether you share it with the rest of the world or you keep it internally, it's going to make you 10 times more effective. I can guarantee that.
I think it's
And I
also
don't guarantee once I'm in search. So.
yeah, it'll fair enough. It also makes you feel more human, because you're actually connecting with what you're doing as opposed to just doing that content. I'm a lyricist. I to write music, and I make the music now, and people are like, it's slop, and I'm like, no, because I spent like 3 hours tuning this fine little part of it so that it could relay the feeling I'm trying to feel. But I digress.
That makes complete sense, Cody. I mean, I get it. And people won't always know what
I do. What I want to final question, because this does come to the question of what is this going to do to the next generation that doesn't have that wisdom?
I have a 5-year-old daughter, so that's a tough question. And it's one that I don't like to wrestle with, honestly, because it frustrates me. Because as I'd like to think one of my superpowers is seeing what's around the next corner. And I've been fairly good at that in my career and my life to some degree.
Yeah.
I would say I'm very worried that we are allowing ourselves the easy without the difficult. So what do I mean by that? If it saves you time, what will you spend your time on? That's the question. So for all those businesses, Cody, that we go out and help, what does that allow them now to do? And is that a commitment they make by us time
Mm,
for that, right? If it's just, well, I won't have to work anymore. Okay, I don't know if that's ultimately what you want, right? If anything, I hope that this technology allows, I hate using the grandiose term humanity, but it allows humanity and us to do things we wish we could do, to spend time doing more and helping more, helping each other more, making the baseline of poverty go up. Like, like essentially, like, when electricity was invented, at some point it was commercialized and almost to a point in which it was now available everywhere, right? To some degree in first world, we'll say. So, and it became a standard of living. Internet has become a standard of living, right? It doesn't mean you don't do things because you have internet. In fact, you do more things, you do different things, right?
yeah.
So I think because we'll have AI, because we'll have these assistants, I hope it doesn't mean this whole idea of like universal income, you don't do anything anymore, you just get paid to exist. That's not really like the world I want for my child. The world I want for my child is one in which she gets to do more things of more value and less things that could have been replaced with an easy button because she's more than an easy button.
Very fair. And I do want to speak onto that. Like, you see this in the data. When people retire, they lose their sense of self. They don't have anything to do. Even myself, I'm like, when I was working, I was just working to get to that end goal of like, can I just be done so I can do what I want? And it's just understanding that you've got to keep on going, you got to keep on trying. And honestly, since starting this, I don't want to retire anymore because I'm having so much fun. Once you start putting the fun into your everyday, it really doesn't make it harder. It makes it more enjoyable to do the harder and learn the hard, like learn
Yes.
more. And I
Yes.
just hope everybody out there understands when it comes time to, hey, I'm done with this. You should be looking at your next thing, trying something new. It's going to help you so much immensely. And to the youth out there, start finding the boomer businesses that are closing down or
Oh, yeah.
being retiring, because those are the opportunities that you can jump in on, have a mentor teach you the entire thing,
Mm.
and take that asset off their hands for them.
And do something they've never been able to do because they more of the same was the way they did it, right? And they were satisfied with the outcomes, and yet you can probably take it to the next level considering just
Having a little bit
just
more
bringing
knowledge.
Excel to the table is like bringing fire, right? Or the wheel. So, that's not a knock. It's that generation they didn't grow up like me with computers. And so I'm proudly a Gen X. And I think I got to be the one who straddled the technology in the old way, which I think is an advantage because we have a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And so I look at that and I say, we have the potential to do amazing things if we choose to. I will say this one thing: be like Uncle Ellie. My Uncle Ellie died at 104, and he died at a good 104, like the kind where he was in hospice asking me whether I brought the cognac. And like, yeah. And when he couldn't even, consume anymore, we were just putting it on his lips
Yeah.
and he didn't imbibe that much. Don't get me wrong, but he liked the good things in life. And Uncle Ellie, until he was 98, went to the office. Now, what did went to the office really mean in New York City? It meant he got up, he went downstairs, he put on clothes, he went downstairs, he got in a cab, he was dropped off at the office, went upstairs, looked at a few things, got back in a cab and went home. At 102, he was asking us because one of the nurses, I think that would come in, or one of the people who came and cleaned or whatever, she spoke Chinese. He spoke 11 languages in his life. He wanted to learn Chinese at 102, right? Now, what is a 102-year-old going to do with Chinese, aside from hopefully speak to the person who comes into their home? But he's not really going to go and, he's not going to China,
Yeah.
right? Let's be honest. So that concept that there's more for us out there, don't settle, I think is a huge thing that people need to recognize, right? It's too easy to settle. Everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear. And friction is not necessarily a bad thing. It just reminds you, A, that the things that are hardest can often be the most fulfilling. And B, that if you want to have fire, you're going to need a little friction, and it's not comfortable, and that's okay. That's okay. We should be working towards a comfort in our uncomfortability. That if we can do that, I think we all become better individuals.
Very fair. This is a great part to leave off on. Who are you? Where can people find you? And anything you want the audience to know before you go.
So I'm Stephan Bajaio. I am available on LinkedIn as my social drug of choice, though it's become very crowded and noisy recently and not as effective as it used to be. So Stephan Bajaio on LinkedIn, Stephan Bajaio. Cody will hopefully drop a link somewhere when he shares this. VibeLogic, so VibeLogic.com is my company. You can feel free to reach out to me there. And I hope that I have the opportunity to kind of help your business think through everything from, is the structural maturity of your marketing set up correctly in order to do the things you want to do? And then are you able to actually know what kind of content resonates, what kind of messaging resonates, and then where that content and messaging are going to be found online in order to make sure it does resonate and lands with your consumers. So I work with just about everyone. I love helping, maybe too much, but I'm excited to have the opportunity to help you if you do reach out.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for coming on. And to everybody out there, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, whatever the hell I'm supposed to tell you. And everything will be in the descriptions down below. And just to everybody out there, stay weird.